Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair will now recognize himself. I want to thank all four of you for being here today and for your service to our country. I'm going to confine my interactions with my own police chief and start by thanking you and your family who is with you today for your service to our community and other communities throughout your distinguished career. We're really fortunate to have you in Spartanburg. And Tim Scott and I want to thank you for helping us with our police community relations roundtables. As you know, they're confidential because we want people to tell the truth, and your voice is an important one that we have benefited from. Your predecessor was a really good friend of mine, Tony Fisher. He also is a law enforcement officer of color, without whom I never would have been elected district attorney. So if folks are looking for someone to blame for me being in public service, Tony Fisher would be the person to blame. And Tony and I would lament from time to time the notion, the deeply held notion within certain communities that victims of color were valued less than white victims. In homicide cases in particular, that the sentences didn't reflect valuing the lives of black victims the same as white victims. And it's interesting to have that conversation with a law enforcement officer of color who well knew prosecutions are only as good as the evidence that we're given. So when you say community relations, the first thing I think of is how do we get the community to trust you and your officers enough to give us the information we know that they have, to present the evidence we know that they possess, so we can value the lives of people of color in exactly the same way we do as white victims. How do we do that?
I don't think it's an easy fix, sir, but as I mentioned earlier, it's what you do before crimes and situations arise. There's no substitute for quality, professional, and equitable service and respectful service in dealing with our citizens in all areas of our city. But breaking down these, unfortunately, historical or traditional barriers between police and the community are hard. I will say that this no snitching or not telling the police giving us what we need to solve crimes isn't as significant as we may think it is, because otherwise we will solve nothing. Information is definitely power. We will not give information readily at the scene, but oftentimes because of relationships built, we'll get that anonymous call of someone giving us what's necessary to identify someone's responsible and eventually bring them to justice. But like you and Director Fisher, that is a tremendous frustration, because we value life, but the community that's being hurt by this violence has to value life too, and stepping up and do what's necessary to bring the people that's responsible for causing the pain and the hardship there to justice. And it really, relationships, if there's one thing that I can just stress, when we go to calls, we're not being invited over for tea or barbecue, obviously. But when we can get together during non-contentious times and break down those barriers into where we see that we have a singleness of purpose, we do care about the community. For example, I try to lead by example by being mentors or being on boards. For example, I chair the Boys and Girls Club in the upstate of South Carolina. I'm on AMI White Pines Kids. These are kids that have run afoul of the law. Being intimately involved, and the people see that you're sincere in your efforts to assist, and that we're not just some entity to come in, effect an arrest, write a ticket and leave. I think that starts us on our way of getting the type of information that you're wanting and that we're needing to be successful in our prosecution of perpetrators of crime.